Hi guys, so today's video is about plantar fasciitis and it'll aim to explain what the plantar fascia is, what the relevant neighbouring soft tissues are and their significance, how plantar fasciitis symptoms present, and importantly how we can self-release and alleviate some of these symptoms. Okay, so the plantar fascia is a thick band of connective tissue that runs from the base of the calcaneus, so the heel bone, and extends all the way to the base of all 5 toes. So it helps to support the arch of the foot and allows the foot to become more stiff and rigid during walking and running. So as the name suggests, plantar fasciitis is the inflammation of the plantar fascia, which can be as a result of a one-off tear from a fall or jumping from a height, or it can be as a result of sort of repetitive strain and micro tearing over a prolonged period of time. I regularly get clients come to me in the lead up to the summer months as they check themselves into extended bouts of road running, having not run for months, but obviously they're keen to get sort of shredded for the holidays. So the sudden spike in load will actually have an acute, so short-term impact on the tissue, generating some inflammation, and there's also a repetitive element due to the very nature of running. So it's important to establish both anatomical and biomechanical factors that can lead to the plantar fascia being prone to inflammation, wear and tear, such as malalignment within the foot, ankle and or even the hip, but also the external factors that can contribute to this inflammation, such as spikes in workload, new activities and exercises, repetitive load and footwear as well. So you may also hear the term plantar fasciosis. Now this refers to the long-term degeneration of the plantar fascia caused by chronic repetitive load through the plantar fascia over time. This chronic stress actually weakens the plantar fascia and leaves it more susceptible to becoming re-inflamed. So you actually have an acute chronic situation whereby the chronic longer-term issue actually flares up into an acute inflammation, thus meaning your plantar fasciosis can flare up your plantar fasciitis, which can lead to a chronic pain cycle that can last months or even years. So now we look into the treatment plan. Now what's crucial here is that you don't just plough into the self-release stuff and keep mindlessly doing what you're doing, because the issue will reoccur. So one of the best bosses I ever had used to say, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So you have to take into account all of the intrinsic, extrinsic factors that we've already mentioned, so as to deal with the causes of the tightness and the inflammation to prevent the issue recurring. The self-release options can begin immediately and must address all of the relevant tissues, including the calf muscles and of course the plantar fascia itself. So if, for example, the plantar fascia is too tender to address, you can still gain some relief from releasing the surrounding tissues, the calf, and others. So the best way to illustrate this point is to look briefly at the anatomy of the lower leg and discuss how these tissues are continuous and how they can affect one another, and also why it's common for them to carry excess tension.
So, as we look at the plantar fascia, we can see, as previously mentioned, the insertions at the base of the 5 toes and how the fascia makes a triangle as it narrows towards the base of the calcaneus. So here's the key concept. As much as it's clinically useful to offer up an origin and an insertion, these tissues don't just stop at these points, and crucial to plantar fasciitis in this instance, the plantar fascia blends into the calcaneus inferiorly, so at the base, and the Achilles tendon blends in superiorly, so at the top of the calcaneus. Thus, the two are effectively continuous across the bone. Therefore, it is more than reasonable to say that tension in one could generate tension in the other. So, now let's look at the soft tissue structures that directly insert into the Achilles tendon. Here we have 3 muscles that collectively make up the triceps surae, 2 of which you may be more familiar with than the third. So the one that we're looking at now, and the one we're going to begin with, is quite frankly the runt of the litter. It's a rather slender, mostly tendinous muscle called plantaris. Now this muscle varies in both thickness and length between people, and in roughly 10% of the population isn't actually present. There's a level of disagreement regarding the functions of plantaris, but like gastrocnemius, which we'll get to, it too crosses both the knee and the ankle. However, plantaris is very slender and largely tendinous, as we've said, so it offers very weak assistance to both plantar flexion, so pointing the toes and ankle down towards the floor, and maybe knee flexion as well. So now let's look at the most superficial of the 3 triceps surae muscles, and one that we've just mentioned. So it is the big, powerful one that you can see quite obviously when you tense your calf, and it's called the gastrocnemius. And this is the more explosive and powerful of the 3 muscles, generating a large amount of force. So underneath this muscle we have soleus, which is a more postural muscle, meaning it likely has more type 1 aerobic dominant fibres as it's relied upon to contract for extended periods. The soleus is part of a group of muscles tasked with an anti-gravity role in keeping us upright, along with some leg extensors, glute max and some back muscles, and we need these muscles to perform in this way as the body's centre of gravity lies in front of the ankle, and we therefore have a natural tendency to lean forwards.
So, having discussed the main neighbouring soft tissues and their roles, it's very clear to see how these tissues are susceptible to excess levels of tension, with soleus under low level contraction for extended periods in order to battle gravity, and gastrocnemius being largely tasked with locomotion and force production. The soleus for me is a real go-to when we're looking at releasing the tension leading into the Achilles and reducing pain and discomfort associated with plantar fasciitis, as it doesn't cross the knee and only crosses the ankle, unlike gastrocnemius, which crosses both the knee and the ankle. So the full force of soleus is placed through the ankle in order to plantar flex the ankle or point the toes and the ankle towards the floor. Whereas the force of gastrocnemius is distributed between effect at the knee and ankle, and actually the gastrocs ability to plantar flex, so point the toes to the floor, the toes and ankle rather, is diminished when the knee is bent. So having established the nature of the neighbouring soft tissues and how tension may lead to the onset or exacerbation of plantar fasciitis symptoms, we look to discover ways of releasing these structures to alleviate the pain and discomfort that one may experience. As mentioned, there are loads of biomechanical and genetic and anatomical differences, malalignments that may predispose a person to plantar fasciitis, which we must address. However, for the sake of this video, we will highlight the key, more generic release methods, if you like, that I have had success with over the last few years, and which serve as trial and error methods to encourage soft tissue freedom and reduce discomfort.
Okay, so here we're looking to roll the plantar fascia with a trigger ball. Ordinarily, I do say to start with a broad applicator and then become more specific. With this, I mean, the tissue is so dense at the bottom of the foot, and also you can take away some of the downward pressure with the opposing foot. So here, starting with the trigger ball is fine as long as you're slow. You can control the pressure going through the foot. We're looking to cover as much of that tissue as we can. So from the calcaneus all the way to each of the toes. The deeper you go, the slower you go. And then once the tissue's warmed, you can pin a tender spot and flex and extend those toes just to get that release, get those tissues gliding. Again, find another spot, pin and stretch, nice soft tissue release there. Okay, so to begin with, we're looking just to warm up the calf muscles, so from superficial to deep. So we start off with a broad applicator, so the foam roller. We're looking to gain contact, broad contact between the ankle and the knee, trying to cover as much of that tissue as we can. The issue with the calves, because it's away from the centre of gravity and weight, you need to place a bit more force through. So putting one leg over the other allows a bit more downward pressure. But obviously you need to warm the tissue up before you can go deeper, and the deeper you go, the slower you go. So again, doing both sides, and once that tissue gets warm, you might want to look at just adding a bit of plantar flexion, dorsiflexion at the ankle. So you pin a tender spot down, get some movement at the ankle. It just creates that nice little active soft tissue release, gets those layers gliding over one another. So once the tissues are nice and warm, it may be appropriate to progress to that trigger ball. So again, you're looking trigger pointing really with this ball, so finding a tender spot and just allowing that pressure just to sink in, allow the discomfort to dissipate. And you can just add in that ankle movement just to allow the layers to glide once you've got rid of all those nasty waste products. I'm not a huge fan of stripping with such specific tools, but if it's comfortable for you, or if you're able just to take some of the pressure off with the other leg, that'd be ideal. So here we have the real sort of go-to generic stretches. So the gastrocnemius dominant stretch here, where you're pushing against an immovable object, putting that heel into the ground, bending that knee in, bringing it close to the other one for the soleus dominant one. These are classic stretches, you've seen them a million times, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They work. And here, the last one, we've got a combination. So you get a bit of gastro, a bit of soleus, plantar fascia as well, and those deep toe and ankle flexors. Perfect stretch, that one.